Carries.
Again, this is a special board meeting due to our handbook. The board needs to get together 2 times per month to look at the reopening updates and data reports. And for that, we do have Ann Christensen here from the Health Department who will go second after Shannon gives her report, and then Ann will follow up after Shannon goes. So Shannon, you're up. You have to unmute yourself, Shannon.
Working on it, sorry. It's my first time, so.
That's actually pretty funny.
Well, it's amazing how after you do this so many times, you still make the same old mistakes.
Yes.
So it is what it is. I'm going to apologize in advance. I have 2 wild dogs tonight, so hopefully they're going to behave themselves. I have the presentation for tonight's October 7th. I'm going to use the same template that we've used in the past. As Larry just said, I'd like to take a minute to welcome Ann Christensen from the Health Department. She's really our expert here. I'm just giving the data that she gives me. So that's a treat for us to have her here tonight. So welcome to Ann. Just a reminder, we reviewed this the last board meeting, which was back in September, believe it or not. And these are the 4 gating criteria that the North Shore Health Department has given us to try to figure out how we make the decisions as school districts on when we move between phases and when we can bring students back into the building. The data that I'm going to be presenting tonight is actually from October 2nd, which is obviously last Friday. So it's somewhat recent. If those of you that are addicted to the news like I am, you probably saw that the state of Wisconsin was highlighted on the national news this evening because the cases in the state of Wisconsin are somewhat out of control. So the data that I'm presenting tonight from the North Shore Health Department is dated from October 2nd. That being said, if you remember our last board meeting, was back in September 16th, and the data that I shared at that board meeting was from September 11th Friday report from the North Shore Health Department. So we've actually missed a few data points. And if you have been watching the parent newsletter, which went out yesterday, you probably got a little advance notice on our data. But here's what you've missed over the last few weeks. Using the 4 gating criteria that we just showed on the last screen, our data from 9/11 with the burden went from 187 to 117 from 9/11 to 9/18. And then Ann maybe can talk more about this, that we went from 117 to 249 from the week from 9/18 to 9/25. Since there weren't board meetings in between those dates, I shared that in the parent newsletter yesterday so that people could kind of get an idea of where we're looking at. And then the chart that I'll show tonight obviously will have the data from October 2nd. So first criteria is the burden. We've talked about this at the last meeting. Once we were listed as high at the last board meeting because we were in the range between 100 and 350. Well, obviously now we are at 350 on the button as of that date, which puts us in the critical state. Again, the same data as showed last time. This is just in a plot graph so that you can look at it in a nice graph form. But again, showing our data as critical. And there's Macy barking. So last time when we showed the data on our daily cases, you'll notice that red line that's on the chart here. Last time was going downward. Unfortunately, the line is now trending upward in the city of Glendale. And again, the last time we showed this data, the percent positivity was lower than 12.2, and I'll show that on the chart again. But we're looking for a number below 5%. In order to allow the school to reopen with more students. This chart is from the North Shore, or from the Milwaukee dashboard, showing the hospital beds. And again, the news tonight showed that the state of Wisconsin is actually opening another site at the State Fair Park in West Dallas. But our data in the Milwaukee County is still looking in the low range, but the numbers on the bottom charts have risen, but we still in the category that we are measuring are still listed in the low in the Milwaukee County. I didn't include this last time, but this is something that Anne from the North Shore Health Department shares. And I thought this would be an interesting piece, and maybe she can talk about this a little bit more, but it shows the age group listed here in this column, the number of cases listed on October 1st, what percentage that is, and then the cases from 9/17 and the increase in the new cases. So just another piece of data. And again, this will be on the website for people to look at more closely. As I know, looking at data on the computers is tricky. This is the table that, again, that we showed the last time, showing where we're at. Sadly, you know, it's a little disappointing that we've moved into the critical with our 350. Last time we were in the red. And again, our trending data was trending downward last time, and now today, as of October 2nd, it's trending upward. So this is our updated chart I did for the school board. I think I sent this to each of you, and I will update this again this Friday. And I'm hoping that something happens that puts us back below 350. But I have this table set up that I will update every single Friday. So the board, if you want to check on this weekly, since we don't meet except for twice a month, you can always look at this. And I will continue putting in the newsletters as we move forward.
Shannon,
Yeah.
can you go back one?
Yep.
So you're saying between the 29th, the 2nd on a Friday, there was 22 more cases?
So it's not necessarily 22 more cases, and I'm going to let Anne explain that, but
Okay.
that burden case is actually the number of cases based on 100,000, so that cities can be compared that are of different sizes.
No, I'm talking about the second column when it says number of new cases. So on the 25th, between the 18th and the 25th, there was 23 new cases. And then you're saying between the 23rd and the 22nd, in the October 2nd, there was 22 new cases.
Exactly.
Is that right? Or
That's correct.
okay.
I have 45 new cases on my sheet if you're taking that total number of 8 cases in Glendale for the 2nd. So just, I just to understand what number of new cases, were you taking just the school age kids or the total number?
Who's trying? Is this Anne?
Yeah, this is Ann, sorry.
Oh, Anne, sorry, that's right, I can't see you. I
Yeah.
took up your chart. If it's not correct, then I will update that.
Okay, yeah, it should be 45 if it's the whole population of new cases in Glendale.
Gotcha. Thanks for giving me even better news. 45, okay. I know that I had an error on one of those charts that I had reached out to you about, but I will make sure I update that. But either way, it's obviously still in the red, so not good. What does this mean? Similar to the same slide as last time, obviously the recommendation to the board would be that we stay put in phase 2. We would like to have our metrics be, you know, at a threshold for 14 days. Oh my gosh. So, yeah. Okay. Yeah, sorry, I wish people should see what goes on with these 2 dogs. So the discussion and questions, I'm going to let like Anne take the lead on this. If there's questions on my presentation, I can obviously slide back. But thanks for listening, and I'm going to mute myself so that no one has to hear these.
Thank you very much.
Thanks, Shannon. With that, I would like to introduce Ann Christensen to our community. Most of you know who she is. She's the head of the North Shore Health Department. And with that, welcome, Ann.
Thank you. Yeah, I appreciate being here and giving you a chance to kind of hear our perspective on the data and the broader kind of trends that are going on both in Glendale and North Shore. And I can give you kind of regional and state perspective too. Just to maybe frame up some of your questions in terms of you may be wondering why these are the indicators that we use. Again, just to kind of give you an understanding of what is burden. You know, it's a term that we use, but essentially what it means is the number of new cases within the last 2-week period. And if you follow COVID issues intimately, you'll know that that's about the time period that somebody's an active case for COVID. So that would be a time period where somebody is isolated and potentially infected. Beyond, essentially it's 10 days, but in this case, we measure burden in 14 days. But beyond that, that person is considered recovered for the most part, not everybody, and therefore considered recovered in our data as well. So that burden really gives us a good sense of what's happening within any 2-week period. It's stable, which means that, you know, if we look at day-to-day changes, and some of the graphs I share do, you know, we get a lot of what I call bouncy numbers, because there's a lot of variation in when and what results we get in any given day. So a 2-week period really gives us a stretch of time where we feel like we're able to assess trend, instead of what I call noise in the numbers that are just the result of, you know, a big data dump of tests in any given day. So that's burden. I'm asked a lot about, again, what does that mean? If we're measuring the population, and the burden in the population, what does that mean for the schools? Why don't we just measure the school numbers or the numbers with the kids? My point for that is that really the community influences what happens in the schools and school transmission, and school transmission influences community. So they can't really be separated and considered as separate entities. If we know that community transmission is high, we know that there are likely going to be cases in the schools, whether they're known or unknown, which is going to result in transmission within the school. And then vice versa. Again, if there's transmission in the school, we know that that's going to have an impact on the community more broadly, and then certainly vulnerable adults in that community. So it's important for us to keep that really broad community focus in mind when we're looking at school decisions and broader mitigation measures. So that's something that's important to know. And then the other data piece that people wonder about is this percent positive or positivity rate. I know that it's in the news, but just to sort of give everybody a definition and how we're using it, for us, it's really an understanding of obviously the transmission happening in the community, but it also gives us a snapshot into what's a sense of, you know, whether enough people are being tested. And if not enough people are being tested, which is what a high percent positive tells us, is that then we're having people that have COVID in the community that don't know about their disease status, and therefore further spreading the virus to other residents in the community. So it is an important indicator, and we use the two together to tell us the story about where we are at any given point in time. Trend is important to look at. Are we trending up? Are we trending down? You know, if we're trending down with those types of indicators like a high burden and a high percent positive, we know then that we're on the right track in terms of what we're doing in the community. We just haven't reached our goal yet. If we're trending upward, that means that we're both not on the right track and we're not even getting to the point of nearing our goal. So we want to look at all of these elements of data as a broader picture of a puzzle instead of individual, you know, points in time or arbitrary cutoffs that say we've hit this number, therefore we need to do this action. And this is not a science, an exact science in terms of, you know, that public health or the schools have exactly the right indicator that says it's safe or that it's the right time to move. There's a lot of variables in play with those decisions, and that's really, you know, something that we're doing together in partnership, because the schools and the school district have an understanding about what that environment is going to be like in the schools, what mitigation measures they can put in place to keep kids and staff safe. And I'm able to tell you, well, given that the risk in the community is, you know, at a certain level, are you able to keep and put in those mitigation measures that are going to keep the kids safe and the staff safe in the buildings? So again, we work in partnership together for this process, and that's why I'm happy to be at this table sharing this information with you. Maybe a point about the cutoffs that we have and that I put out through the North Shore Health Department. These are aligned with the Department of Health Services. They have what they call COVID activity levels on their website that they put out earlier in the summer. and we've aligned with those. We've also aligned the higher level because at a certain point, Department of Health Services cut off their level at 100 cases per 100,000. And we knew that that was going to be really, if we put our highest bar at 100 and we exceeded that, it would be very challenging to go into more models of education like a hybrid or in person for a very long time. So we aligned our higher level of 350 with Harvard's Path to Zero, which is a model that's been out there again since the end of summer and provided additional guidelines for public health in schools. So that's where some of this information comes from. And then CDC recently put out their own indicators. They actually put out thresholds similarly. They're not exactly aligned one for one, but in terms of the general categories, they are pretty much in alignment with what our recommendations are from the health department. So that gives you a broad picture of where these numbers come from and what we're using and why we're using it. One other thing that I would encourage the board and the schools to do is also look internally at their numbers in terms of the number of staff that might be in isolation or quarantine at any given time and the number of students, as well as, again, those mitigation measures that are going to be necessary to achieve a lower level of risk in the schools. So how much are the classrooms able to keep the kids at that 6 feet apart? What's your perspective on mask wearing for the students and staff? Hand hygiene, do you have enough sanitation and cleaning supplies and those sort of things? Because those are all very important elements as we start even to think about, okay, what's it going to look like when we get kids back in class? Okay. All right, so I'm sure you have lots of questions and I'm ready to take them all.
So before people ask questions, I do want to give a shout out to Ann. I think the board knows this, but twice per week, all of the superintendents in the North Shore, all the way through Port Washington, Ozaki, and the North Shore superintendents get together twice a week, and Ann is on those calls twice a week. And so we use her expertise. She's not doing this just for Glendale. Ann is a very, very busy woman because she's doing it for all the districts, for all of us, and giving reports to all of us. So Ann, I just wanted to say publicly, thank you. You've been a great support to me, but also to this school district. So with that, we can open it up for questions.
I just want to ask a couple of very quick questions. First off, in North Shore area, are we getting, you said that there was 25 or how many children are getting in this 2-week period have been tested positive?
In Glendale or the overall North Shore?
Glendale. I mean, I guess in the overall North Shore too. I'm curious, but in Glendale, was it that 22 number?
So in Glendale, we had in the last 2 weeks, which Friday is the last reporting period, so 2 weeks from the 2nd, you had 12 students under the age of, between the ages of 0 and 19 that tested positive in that time period. 8 of those children are under the age of 10.
And is that,
and then,
and I'm sorry, just, is that, following a certain trend compared to weeks previously? Is it increasing?
Yeah. So Dr. Kilton, can you go to that last data table slide? So that, especially for the kids under 10, that's a 400% increase from where we were in middle of September. Yeah, right there. Now, we've got small numbers, so that's going to make percent seem really high. But for a trend, that's to me pretty important to note and to be concerned about. So when we're looking at even the lower end or the other end of our age distribution, COVID, the story of COVID was really about older adults and the impact of COVID on seniors early on. And what this data tell me, I'm looking specifically at this new case column, is that we're seeing growing case numbers in our younger population and our young adult population. We're still obviously seeing it in the working age and older adult, but this trend shows that it's really hitting school age kids and college age kids. And that's Glendale and the North Shore and across the state. And
so I guess one question is that, are these transmissions, can they be tracked to school transmission? I mean, are kids who are in school in the North Shore physically and hybrid? Are these the kids who are turning up with it?
It's a good question. So, so in the North Shore, our schools are either hybrid or virtual for the most part. Our private schools are doing more of the full reopening. We have yet to see, we have not seen in-classroom evidence of in-classroom transmission. And the reason for, in the public schools, the reason for that is that we've had a couple of cases in the school, and when they identify close contacts, the number of close contacts have been very limited because of that hybrid model. So the students are, for the most part, 6 feet apart in those classroom settings. So it's just the students in the very, close vicinity to that students that are identified as close contacts. Again, because of that hybrid model.
So they're not getting it most likely from other students, they're getting it from the family members.
Well, where we're seeing transmission for school age is in 2 ways. One is after school and outside of activities. So they're transferring to friends. And then the trend that I'm also seeing that I'm concerned about is what's happening in, after school or daycare environments. So where people are sending their kids in during other learning times. So we're starting to see more transmission in those environments, which would be more of that, potentially similar to a school-based transmission, but it's not in the school setting, it's happening in the daycare setting or the childcare setting.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Anne, I just have a quick question from the last numbers. I know that there were a lot of state universities that kind of quarantined their dorms and then the kids came back home. Do you think that some of those higher numbers as of late were because kids were coming home and perhaps spreading it to their families? Did your contact tracing kind of find that, or is that kind of negligent or negligible?
We did see that happen. We had a number of students return from La Crosse and Madison to the North Shore area, and then quarantine if they were exposed, or isolate if they actually had disease at home. And then we did see some transmission from those students to their family members, both their parents as well as potentially siblings. So we saw a little bit of that. That has slowed down a bit. We are not getting the influx of the college students right now. That was about 2 weeks ago. But those transmissions did occur, or that transmission.
Okay, thank you. And I just, as an aside, I want to thank you for all your hard work. I can't imagine what your job was before this, but I'm imagining that you probably had less hours and less time with school personnel than you do now. So thank you for everything that you've done.
Yeah, no, this is good.
We do have one community member who'd like to ask a question.
Oh, okay. Just say, hey, Anne, how are you?
Hi, Amber, good.
Good. So you said you were talking about trends earlier. And are we seeing the spread more through communal spread or through group gathering? And how do we keep that trend down?
Yep.
I also have another question. Are we seeing more asymptomatic or symptomatic cases?
2 great questions. So the first one about community transmission. With our levels right now, there's so much transmission happening that it's occurring in lots of places. I would say, though, that the bulk of the transmissions happen in gatherings, whether they're personal, family gatherings, people attending weddings, funerals, and those types of things. Close contacts are family members, number of people picking it up from workplace settings. And then there's the random settings where people say, well, I haven't been out, I've only been to the grocery store, I don't know where I would have gotten it. Those are more of that community setting where you really don't know where you could have gotten it. So I would say, just to take a wild guess, based on the contact tracing process, maybe 2/3 of people have some sense of where they got it. Oh, I was with my friend at this thing and somebody had it. And then maybe 1/3 of people are, saying that they have no idea where they would have gotten it because they haven't been in contact with anybody. That's just a guess, though, based on my sense of listening to the disease investigators. And now I've forgotten your second question. I'm sorry.
How many, actually now I have a follow-up question. But my second question is, how many are, like, do you have, how many are asymptomatic?
Oh,
As far as-
asymptomatic.
yeah,
Yeah. You know,
where
it's
they
hard.
don't know where they have it, you know, and they continually spread.
Yeah, we have a number of asymptomatic, but I think that more people that are coming to us have some signs and symptoms. And I actually think, you know, we talk about symptomatic and asymptomatic as yes or no, but what I also pick up from, again, our nurse contact investigators and case managers is that people are mildly symptomatic and they may have the signs of allergies or some, you know, a headache or shortness of breath that they've attributed to another you know, condition, and then they go to get tested and they think of themselves as asymptomatic, but then when we do our investigation and ask about signs and symptoms, then they start to disclose that they had symptoms. So you know, it really is a very wide spectrum from people who have absolutely nothing to people who have, you know, very severe symptoms, and it's really hard to land on, you know, what percentage is what. I mean, the asymptomatics are more the people that have to be tested for pre-existing conditions, or they're going in for some kind of medical treatment, or they need a test for workplace clearance or a college clearance, you know, to get back to something. And then they test positive and they're like, you know, I had no idea. And then, you know, obviously people with symptoms, I think the word has really gotten out about people with symptoms getting tested, and obviously that's what we encourage is anytime you have a symptom to go and get tested. There's pretty ease of access with the National Guard sites and you know, all of the federally qualified health centers in our area getting tested.
Okay, my last question now. So being a Glendale resident, how often should just one go get tested, considering there are people who are asymptomatic, who you just said, like, got tested and have no idea? Should we be getting tested on a regular basis, like once a month, once or twice a month, like just to be a responsible Glendale citizen?
You know, it's a very hard question to answer, because there's the ideal and there's kind of reality in terms of the resources that we have available. There's still limited resources for testing in Wisconsin and our area. So I would not encourage people just to go out and get tested just for the sake of it. You know, there may be a future where that's a different recommendation, but right now we just don't have the resources, and we want to reserve them for the people with signs and symptoms or have been in close contact with somebody. So those would be the two primary reasons for somebody to go get tested, rather than just sort of their own kind of surveillance testing. So again, that's what we have with the resources, and that's what that recommendation is.
Thank you, Ann,
Yep.
for all your hard work and tireless hours.
Danielle?
Yeah, so I'm not sure if I'm gonna say this right. I'm thinking about data from schools, and you sort of talked about, so I'm sensing you have an understanding of what transmission is like in schools. So is the North Shore Health Department collecting that data? Is there like a separate you know, graph or compilation of that data that you guys have, or that you're compiling, that's sort of going to give us a picture, you know, as of how it's been going at the various ways that schools have reopened in our communities? Is there some sort of way to make that, you know, big picture or connect those dots? Does that make sense?
It makes a lot of sense. The best answer to that is I don't know. In that there's no easy way to measure that from my health department lens. I think that would be really something to advocate that the state do, because then you have a picture of a much larger pool of schools, and you can link the data more back to this different school models. Because what they would be able to do is really link the cases and the contacts and who then goes on to develop the disease. The reason I say it's hard from my vantage point is that with being in the North Shore, We have parents that live in another city. We have contacts that really spread out geographically that make it a very challenging way to assess what those impacts are for transmission. Whereas the state, I would encourage them to find the capabilities to do that type of analysis. What we have been doing with our schools is, and maybe let me answer in a more, in another way too in just a second, but with the schools, working closely with the school nurses or a COVID, identified person that captures a lot of the data on who are the cases and who is in quarantine. We go back and forth with the school nurses and Lori from your district for keeping track of who those people are. Number of our school districts have obviously staff that live outside of our jurisdiction. We've also got students that live outside of our jurisdiction. So the schools in many ways have a better set of the data than we do, because I only see the 7 communities of the North Shore. And so my lens on the data is very limited. Whereas the school and the school nurse or liaison, or however it's going to be set up, has a much broader view of the whole population in the school. So, really we go back and forth and can kind of tease out anecdotally, okay, Johnny had COVID, these were his contacts, so-and-so developed COVID from that list of contacts. But it's a fairly labor intensive and much more qualitative process than being able to say, this kid had COVID and 25% of his contacts turned positive. There's some of that can be done, but it would be quite intensive to do.
Okay.
It's a great question though. It's what we all want to know.
Well, if there's no other questions, I guess going once, going twice, sold. But, Anne, I want to say thank you very much for coming in. It's very helpful for us. As board members, I think it's really important for us to be able to put a face on things and be able to find a connection to help us understand these issues in a very straightforward way. And I think you've heard it already, but thank you very much for all the work that you're doing.
Sure. I hope next time I come back, the data look green and ready to go. I feel, Amber, your question about what can the community do? I think we're back to the place of, keeping our circles small, staying within our family units, being mindful of what sort of activities we engage with, especially as the holidays come around the corner. I'm very concerned about that. I think the governor's order yesterday is a good step. I think it prioritizes education and wanting to get the kids back and keep them back in school. But we do as a community have to think about how and where we go and, our role in keeping transmission low so that we can bring these numbers back down. I think we can do it. We've turned it around in July, and I don't, I'm an optimistic person that we'll be able to turn it around again, but we all do need to work together to do that.
Okay.
So we did, Mr. Franklin, have one late question from Tracy Stetler, if you want to.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. Mr. Stetler.
Hello, I actually had a few questions. I recently saw at the North Shore Health Department page that we started notating antigen tests. And I just had, you know all the details. And so I'm hoping that you can explain why they're in a different column or how that works. My second question is, do you feel like there's enough contact tracing in the North Shore / Glendale? Do you feel like you're getting a lot of cooperation and having great success there? And then my third question, I suppose, is more for the board, I suppose, which is just, are we tracking cases in the school to kind of help the North Shore Health Department, kind of like she mentioned, or is that something that we could consider doing? Thank you.
And I'll start with the third question first. And yes, we work very closely with the North Shore Health Department. And if there's a COVID case in one of the schools, we actually do the contact tracing and then inform the health department our findings. So, and then I'll let Ann answer the other two.
Yeah. So starting with antigen testing. So that, as I mentioned, the testing landscape is going to change and is in the process of transitioning. So not to get into details, but right now, what has been the standard for testing is called a PCR test, which is a molecular test. It's a very reliable, sensitive, and specific test. And those tests that are performed as PCR tests are determined to be confirmatory by CDC and Department of Health Services. As we transition into faster tests, more rapid tests, we're moving into a new type of testing called an antigen test, which is a test of protein. And the sensitivity and specificity of those tests is not as strong. And they're actually under emergency use or authorization from the FDA. So the CDC and DHS consider results from antigen tests, positive results, probable. We have a whole flow chart of what actions and what's supposed to happen at the provider level based on antigen test results and whether somebody should get a follow-up PCR test based on those results. But if you have signs and symptoms and you get an antigen test and it's positive, our role in public health is to follow through on that case as if it was confirmatory, but it is still labeled probable. And the reason that that is from CDC to DHS and then to us. The reason that we are keeping them separate is that the state health department is keeping them separate in their data. And we want to make sure that our data are comparable, apples to apples, with the states so that our numbers don't look higher than the states. But again, by reporting them, we're still reporting our numbers of cases that help decision makers like you know what is the disease activity in the community. So we have them separate for now. It's probably not going to be that way for the long term because my guess is the state will change how they're categorizing antigen tests in the future. But, you know, we had, I can't remember if it was 7 positive antigen tests in the last 24, 36 hours. And if we're not reporting those to the public, they're not going to understand that we have 6 additional people that we've considered positive for COVID and are tracking. So that's what those antigen results are. And the data that were showed to you are all based on PCR confirmatory. So when you see the burden at this point, we're still using PCR or confirmed cases. We have not incorporated antigen testing into those numbers yet. Again, for the purposes of comparing ourselves and keeping the numbers clean, but know that there are additional positives in the community. And my hope and what we've asked as local health departments to the state is that they fix this reporting problem, which is a concern for us, which I'm guessing you may have those concerns too, so that we can all be sharing the same information in the same way so that when we measure burden, it's not essentially an undercount of cases. It's really the true burden in the community. I'm sorry, I cannot remember your second.
Oh, no, that's okay. And thank you so much for explaining that, really.
Yeah.
Do you recommend, a follow-up to that would be, which test format at this stage in the game would you recommend us be pursuing? And then the forgotten question was about cooperation and contact tracing, and if you feel like your experience and if we have enough contact tracers and the cooperation for you. And thank you, Smalley. Mr. Smalley, I didn't realize that the school was doing that tracing. That's great news. Thank you.
Yep. So I recommend PCR in the sense that you have then a confirmed result. And then if you're positive, the CDC has said that you don't need to quarantine for 90 days after a positive result. So there's kind of some good news in that sense. And that is not the case with an antigen. If you test positive with antigen, you still need to quarantine if you get exposed again. Now, the advantage of the antigen is it's quick. So you can get a test, you can get information right away within, 15 minutes or so, rather than PCR, which can take 3, sometimes 4 days. So there's some benefit of antigen in that you get results quick. But there's, cost in the sense of the information you're getting and what would happen if you get exposed again. So it's hard to give a straight answer to what is best, as much as, what are you hoping for from your information? And then contact tracing, just more generally, we've had a whole variety of experiences with contact tracing, from people who are very forthcoming with information and people who are just really not interested in sharing. So, it's hard to say what percent of people. My point in when I'm asked this is contact tracing is not meant to be invasive and oversight into your private business and to know all the places you go, as much as to be informative to people that they have been exposed to COVID. But yeah, we've had a variety of experiences with people's sharing of information, and we totally understand that. This is, even personally, it's hard to want to share all the places you've been and all the people you've been with, especially if you've been in places where the risk of transmission is high. But I would say overall, for the most part, people are responsive and helpful and supportive. But it's not perfect by any means.
Oh, thank you. Let me ask one quick question before we do let you go. If someone has any questions or if they need to get any additional information, where do they go?
Yeah, so our website is pretty informative. It's got a lot of the data that was shared tonight, as well as, we update the burden numbers, I think twice a week. So that's even in there if you wanted to take a sneak peek. I think we updated it Monday, and Glendale's at 373. Actually, we've gone up. So the website is a good place. And then we have an email, just a general inbox where people can take or send questions. And then, we can, just calling our main number is another way. We've got our staff that are available for questions and to helping people talk through situations and providing information. So phone, email, website. We also have a daily briefing that we put out. And then obviously we have lots of social media that we put out information. So lots of different ways to know about what's going on or to reach us.
All right, that's nshealthdept.org, and your phone number is 371-2980.
Yep.
Is that all right? Great.
And then, Ann, I just wanted to clarify, because I was thinking about how did we mess up the numbers so incredibly poorly? And the answer is you are correct, and so is Shannon, because you did 2 week and she did each week. So 23 plus 22 is 45. And you said there's 45 new cases. We just broke it out by the week. So our data is correct and your data is correct. So I'm glad we were able to clarify that. So thank you. And again, publicly, you've been a rock star for the North Shore. We've worked together for many years through other, flu-like winters. This has tested you and your health department, and in my opinion, you guys have been just rocking it. So thank you very much, Ann.
I appreciate everything. Thanks, guys.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah. Take care.
Okay.
Have a good night.
Okay. The next discussion item, and I put it on this board meeting on purpose because our numbers are down. We had anticipated numbers going down. We are down 86 students, of which 58 resident students. We had 28 additional open enroll out. Most of those are in 2nd, 3rd, 4th, and 5th grade, which would make sense to me that they are open enrolling to districts that are either in person or going to private schools. The good news, if you remember all of my Wisconsin finance budget hearings that I've had, is that this budget won't be affected by this, because on a 1-year basis, you get a hold harmless on reduction of students. So this year's budget is not going to be affected at all. Long term, it could be a problem, but I also do believe that this is mostly COVID related. The other big drop was in 4K. We are down 23 4-year-olds. And I also believe that's more of a COVID related response than it is that there weren't any babies born 4 years ago. I think that they're out there, they're just not choosing to use 4-year-old kindergarten to be virtual for 2.5 hours. So I do think coming back in long term, our budget's going to be fine. But I did want to point out that last year on the third Friday, we had 1,045 total students in the district. This year it's 959, so down 86 students. But that, again, long-term, I believe is more COVID related than it is Glendale related, and should not be a long-term budget problem. But for those of you who really love budget, October 21st is the budget meeting. So we'll talk more about it then. I just wanted to get those numbers out there because third Friday just happened a couple weeks ago. With that, Mr. Franklin, I'm going to give you C and D, and then I'll come back with a Nicolay
Molly has a question.
update and then a visitor participation.
Oh.
Tamika, you had a question first?
No, I thought Molly had her hand up. Never mind.
All right. So item 3C, discussion on scheduling committee meetings. We have discussed that we're going to be moving away from committee of the whole. We did keep today's meeting a special meeting, but the reason why we're going to be moving from the committee of the whole is to try to get board members to develop a little bit more specialized knowledge in the areas, to provide more time to have all of our board members delve into specific areas. And so we think that that's going to work pretty well for the board. We think it's going to work pretty well for the public. But we wanted to discuss that, and I also wanted to entertain suggestions on how to schedule. But just so that the public's aware, we have typically 6 standing committees, one of which doesn't really meet too much anymore, which is Nicolay Area Shared Services Subcommittee, for a variety of different reasons. But we have Policy Committee, Finance, Curriculum Instruction, Communications, and then Buildings and Grounds. And what I wanted to do is twofold. One is to remind the board way back when what I formally appointed them on. And 2 is to generate a discussion on the best manner of scheduling with our varied schedules. If we want to do something where we stack them on a day, if we want to meet every other week or once a month, and so on and so forth. So Buildings and Grounds is Tamika and Molly, and Communications is Danielle and Teresa. Curriculum Instruction is Molly and Danielle. Finance and Personnel is Teresa and I. Nicolay Area Shared Services is Tamika and I. And then Policy is Tamika and Teresa. So what I wanted to do is to just hear from the board on how you felt you ought to start scheduling meetings, a start time, and also, Dr. Moser, since you're joining us, I think this is an opportunity for you to also engage with the board, and I think that there's just a lot of great opportunities to divide things into committees formally. But I want it to be predictable for everyone, public included. So if anyone had any thoughts on the best way to do that, I think that the best way to do it is to schedule a committee meeting a week and have each committee meet once a month to start. That's generally what we did before. We switched to committee of the whole. Larry, you can correct me on that.
My personal opinion is let the committees, we have certain committees are going to meet more than just a couple of, depending on what it is. Right now, just like Larry said, that we should be probably looking at our policy book, that me and Teresa might meet, 1 or 2 different times, but we have to get it, we have to decide when we can meet because it's just the 2 of us and then the superintendent. So I don't necessarily know if scheduling a set exact meeting right at this time is going to help right now, because none of us have really, we have to work with each other's schedule. They will be posted, they will be on the on the website, but right now, I don't know what Molly, I have 2 committees, one with Molly, one with Teresa. I have to figure out those 2 people and how their schedule matches with mine. So I think we need to talk individually between these committee people to see what their schedules are like, and then post it after that.
I'm fine with that. You go ahead.
President Franklin, have you named a chair for each of the committees?
So we've never formally named chairs, and it's, way back in the day, it was informal by seniority who would be chair, but I haven't appointed a formal chair for each of these committees yet, but I mean, as a default, I would leave it by seniority on the board.
Well, I would agree with Tomika's posture. I have worked with the committee system. It does work, and it does work with the system I've used is the chair works with their other committee member in setting the date. So exactly what Tomika is suggesting is probably the best, as long as you set a guideline that it will meet at least once a month for reporting to the full board. Just that general guideline, but then let the committee, if there's a chair, the chair will work with the other committee member on a date, and I would make myself available. I'll make myself available if it's during the day, if it's at night, to be present. And it is true, you would operate the committees as public meetings, postings, and minutes, and everything is the same, except it's a smaller number of board members who are present.
And then the other thing too, which you also alluded to, which, just to make sure the board, I'm sure that the public's aware, is that when we do have individual committees, instead of all the voting board members present, what happens is we typically don't act on an action. So there's no voting, there's no quorum, although there could be quorum there. But at least our practice has been in the past that we have discussed an issue. I don't recall voting specifically on an issue to pass up to the board.
Correct, because the committee isn't, you will not have enough, even if a third board member shows up, it's not a board meeting, so you cannot pass any agenda. There's no agenda items to approve. They're all discussion items at committee meetings.
And the only thing I remember is the only thing you would vote on is if we want to send it to you to put on the agenda or
Correct.
not.
Yep.
That's the only thing. If we're working through policy and we don't have anything yet to put on there, then there wouldn't be something to bring to you. Once we have something solid, depending on whatever the committee is, that's when you would, just kind of agree that this is our next step to go to the board on the full board with it.
Correct.
Okay.
President Franklin, what you do is all the board members can come to a committee meeting, but what you do is you make notice on the committee posting that only committee members can, if you do vote, as Tomika is suggesting, only committee members can take any action that might be taken. Other board members would be there as citizens, but you do notice, you do put on your posting that board members other board members would be there, but they're not acting as a full board.
And we can work on that notice. Then I think the only other question then is when to start. And I think that we ought to start, in November. If anyone disagrees about, when to start, let me know. But I think that starting, the first week of November would give us time to coordinate on those schedules and put something together. But that's, I think, where I'm coming from. Tomika?
Danielle has a question.
Oh, Danielle.
Just so, in thinking about the bi-monthly report of the reopening updates that the board has to receive, will we designate one of these committees, or how, or I'm just wondering how that will work?
I think that's a great question. And the answer is we can discuss that. I mean, really, I think that it falls into the Curriculum and Instruction Committee. Only because, frankly, it could fall under policy, but I think it's more appropriately curriculum instruction
So-
would receive that report.
So what I would suggest, first of all, is at our next board meeting, decide what goes under each privy of the committees. Just like this particular thing, this is a little bit out of the gate. So which, what committee it would go in. So we'll talk about it at our school board meeting, decide what issues go under what. Obviously, if we're talking about, a boiler, it goes under, maintenance. But if something is a little bit particularly, it could go either way. Let's make sure that it goes in one or the other, and that will be the privy of that particular. That is what we can do between now and, or think about it, or you can come up with it between now and our next board meeting. Then bring up the issues that will be talked about within each committee, so the public knows if they are interested in this particular topic, this is the committee meeting they want to talk or want to see or they want to go to. And then we can schedule, and we should have at least a scheduling kind of background by then at our next board meeting, which is in 2 weeks from now. We should be able to, so that's kind of where that's my suggestion on how we should go about this.
I would only add, I mean, I think that Larry and then Elliot are the people who probably have the best idea of,
Well, I don't care who does it. I'm just saying it just needs to be done.
Yeah. All right. That's fine then. So
Mr. Franklin, I'm sorry to interrupt. I just want to give an update on the North, our partner committee meetings.
Yeah.
And the reason that that committee, we can meet. However, when you have 4 districts and only one shows up, it's not much of a meeting. So that's why it hasn't, the other partner districts have decided that they didn't want to do it as a board committee, that they wanted the district administrators, which is why I meet with the district administrators twice a month.
Yeah, thanks for clarifying that. Right. That's always been our problem.
The reason we keep it as the committee is each year I go back to the other districts and I ask them, or I tell them that our board would love to do this again. And the last 3 years have said thanks, but no thanks.
Yeah, and you've given a lot of effort, and Bob Roska was very much a big proponent. I know that their excuses, we've done a lot of sharing agreements directly through 6603 and whatnot, but I think it's a great thing to have, and yeah, I think it's a good thing to have as a standing committee too, but thank you for pointing that out. All right, then I think that I've got my direction, so I will communicate with everyone offline between now and the next board meeting. And I think that unless there's anything else, we can talk about item 3D, which is a preliminary discussion on the process for selecting permanent district administrator. We are really fortunate tonight to have 2 district administrators in our presence. Larry, who will be retiring effective November 16th, I think the date is, and Elliot Moser, Dr. Elliot Moser, whose official start date is today. And so we're working on the transition, but at the same time, we're in this period where we have to plan forward for the school district's needs. And what I wanted to do is to actually defer a little bit to Dr. Moser here for his thoughts, as hiring him was one of the things that we sought to do, and his hiring him was to help us plan. And we're in October now, and I know that we need to have this process in full bloom really by the end of the year. So we're on a tighter time frame than what some people might think. Obviously, we have Dr. Moser until the end of June, but we really want to have someone selected in spring. And so, Dr. Moser, and just in terms of our starting process, I indicated to you that, I've received a couple of, headhunter emails and so on and so forth. I know there are some resources to start doing that, but
Can we talk about this if this is not on an agenda item though?
it is a preliminary discussion on the process for selecting permanent district administrator. It's on the agenda.
Oh, it's not on the one I have. Okay. Or
Yeah.
I don't see it. So
That's right. It's
just
3D.
asking.
So, but yeah, so I just wanted to get your thoughts on the process and on the actions that we're going to be taking, which aren't going to be actions for tonight, but things that we need to line up to start preparing for.
Well, thank you, President Franklin and members of the school board and the community. It is not too early to start the process. You're probably right on target. In fact, Superintendent Smalley and I started today talking about it. We met this morning and we had a discussion. I am recommending to the board that all 5 of you will actively participate in this process. Not be any committee discussion. It would be a committee of the whole. This is too important for, let's say, 2 members of the board to lead that discussion. All 5 of you need to be a part of this. I'm suggesting also that I bring to you suggestions in an open meeting for transparency for the community, so they can see everything you're doing in terms of selecting a superintendent. The process from A, which could be my talking with Superintendent Smalley today, and each step along the way that leads to your selection. One of your first decisions will be selecting a search firm, and of course, the final decision will be selecting the new superintendent. But I'm suggesting that I lay the steps out for you, and then you change them, add to them. This is going to be your process. This is, and it should be done in the open. So if there is input from the community, from the staff, from anyone who wants to have a contribution, let's give it to them. As a member of the community, I would like to have that opportunity. So I'm suggesting that I bring back to you, it may not be the October 21st meeting that Superintendent Smalley has talked about, because Larry, as I understand, that's going to be the budget discussion. Am I correct on that?
It is the budget update. It's the final budget meeting of the 2020-21 school year, but we could also add another agenda item.
Okay.
So it's
I could bring to you some preliminary thoughts on the process, and let you have a chance to start kicking at it and seeing what things may be left off, what you'd like to have added. But it would be done in the open. I'm emphasizing that to the community and to the staff. And I probably will have started talking with staff members on their input before the 21st to convey on to you. So President Franklin, I guess that's my suggestion.
So in the interim, you're going to start talking with staff members to start listening to them and putting together a process for understanding their perspective. We have, between the 2 of us, lists and other contacts of people. Should we then be arranging, to start contacting them? What kind of a timeline is it to make that initial contact?
What you're talking about
The search firm, yeah.
The search firms?
Yeah.
You won't do that until you agree upon the process. You'll be putting an RFP out to search firms.
Oh, wait. Oh, I'm sorry.
Tamika, go ahead.
Dr. Moser, the thing that I have a I'm confused about is if I think we either decide if we're going with a firm or not going with a firm. I think most of us want to go with the firm, but with that being said, isn't the firm who is going to help us decide what the process is? Because I mean, just in general, they are going to decide like how we get the input from the community, how we get the input from our teachers. How are we going to have meeting? Wouldn't we need at least the firm before we actually figure out what the process is? Because I'm just
You're
asking.
correct. You're correct in the actual search.
Okay.
You are correct, but that's the actual search.
Okay.
The process leading up to the selection of the search firm is extremely important. And
Okay. Okay, and I didn't know there was a difference until just now, so thank you. So we're fine.
There is, and you can lay out some tentative deadlines. You'd like to have a superintendent selected by the end of February, but you always, in working with that search firm, you will work with them, and they will be the ones who you're going to develop that relationship with. But you're correct. Now, that is part of that process, is deciding, do you want a search firm? And finding out what that's going to cost, and putting that in the budget, and making sure it's totally transparent. All those things are part of this process. Unfortunately, some searches go bad. I hate to say that. And Larry and I talked about that this morning. Some searches do go bad, but that's because you haven't thought through all the steps leading up to what you as a school board are going to be looking for. I think you have laid everything out very well so that this will be a successful search. I think the timing is good, and you're going to have plenty of time to attract. I think we'll be sending out RFPs to, could be 7 or 8 firms, and you're going to interview whatever number you want, and then you're going to select the firm, and then the race begins, and then you're going to be off and running. You will want to select the firm, as President Franklin indicated, before the end of the year. That certainly will need to be part of the process. You'll want to probably post the position as soon as you can.
Okay. So the first.
Thank you for that question, Tomika. That's good that we talked about that. That's very good.
So then our most immediate thing here then is really to get for you to have some discussion, and for us to put together, or actually I guess it would be you and Larry, put together an RFP, but then also to identify firms. And so let me ask you this one follow-up, because obviously this is getting into the weeds a little bit, but how do we identify the firms? What's the best pathway for doing that? I mean, responding to unsolicited emails isn't necessarily the best way to do it.
President Franklin, between Larry and I think we can, I know, and Larry knows, what the premier Wisconsin firms are. We also know other premier firms that may be outside of the state of Wisconsin that come into Wisconsin to do searches. There are lists. We can find the list. The Wisconsin Association of School District Administrators keeps a list, and Larry had mentioned earlier in the meeting tonight, he's a member. I'm a member of that as well. So finding the firms to send out an RFP will not be a problem. And if an unsolicited request comes in, for example, a few years ago, you had hired an individual that may not have been on the list, Ken Moe. He had his own firm. Larry, am I correct? And he.
Yep. You're going back in the Wayback Machine that none of these board members know.
Yeah,
but
you may not know. Ken Moe was.
Mr. Peabody.
Not to throw a name out there, but you end up hiring him And I believe he's the one who hired Larry. Am I correct?
That is correct. He recommended to the board to hire me, because at that
So,
time I was the principal at Glen Hills.
Right.
He's
Point
an
of
Do we trust
example
him
of-
again? No.
So he's an example of an unsolicited person who became aware of the vacancy and came to Glendale-River Hills.
Thank
Okay.
you.
So
So then I guess I would ask you between now and our next meeting to have that preliminary discussion and with Larry and work on what that list is of the firms. And I'll send you what I have, and then we can figure it out from there and have another update at the next meeting.
Teresa has a
I have
question.
a quick question. Dr. Moser, how common is it for a district to choose an out of Wisconsin search firm? And how common is it for a district to choose a superintendent from out of state?
Okay, it's very common for a search firm from out of the state to be hired. Nicolay has done that. If I may refer to Nicolay, excuse me, the search firm that was hired when I retired was from out of state, was from Illinois. The search firm that is probably used the most in the state of Wisconsin has its headquarters in Minneapolis. But it has local, just like the firm that was hired to replace me at Nicolay. They used local people, but the firm was out of state. The firm in Minneapolis has local people. And our out-of-state people hired, they are, I would say it's not the most common thing for out-of-state in Wisconsin right now. And I have not, your next question should be how successful are superintendents from out of state? That I don't know. I can't, Larry and I talked about that this morning too. I haven't studied that. That was not part of my research at Concordia. That maybe I should have done that. That's a good point. I think it is. You're going to probably, we will probably include, there's a firm in Omaha, a firm in Cedar Rapids, Iowa, a firm in Illinois. There's the firm in Minneapolis. The Wisconsin School Boards Association will be another firm that we will probably look at. And Larry probably can think of another couple that are on the list as well.
Thank you, that's good to know.
Here's what I think is the bonus that you guys have as a school board is by hiring Elliot. He's going to go through the process with you, and then you will look at him and you're going to say, hey, we want this firm because they came in $8,000 cheaper than everybody else. Let's do that. And Elliot would go, wait, there's a reason they're $8,000 cheaper. You might not want that one. And so I think combined between the board, your wisdom, and Dr. Moser, you will get a very good search firm.
And
Thank you.
I'm glad you're still around for this transition too. All
If I
right.
may say, President Franklin, one of the reasons I'm familiar with the search firms is I can't keep a job. So
There you go.
Well, we'll see. All right. Thanks a lot. Larry, you're number 3E, I think.
Yep, my last one is Nicolay Partner District update. And I will have a much bigger update on October 21st because our meeting was pushed back till tomorrow, and actually worked out for Dr. Moser and I will both be participating in our bus consortium meetings with Right Way. We have a bus contract for the year, but because we are virtual, we're trying to work out an addendum like we did at the end of last year. I don't have one to bring to you yet. I'm sure hoping to bring it to you at the October board meeting. We have another meeting tomorrow. So Dr. Moser and I will both be at that meeting to get our most up-to-date information for you. And other than that, again, as I kind of said to the community, the partner districts and all the North Shore districts, we are still meeting twice a week on Tuesdays and Thursdays, so that we can bring you the most up-to-date information that we can from a COVID-related, health-related, and what's best for school. So, so more to come on that at October 21st, and then I turn it back over to you for visitor participation.
All right, visitor participation. Any visitor may speak on any non-agenda item at this time. State law and or board policy may limit the board's response. We're going to limit to 2 minutes today. I will give a moment for anyone. Larry Sandler is first person. Larry? You can unmute.
Yeah, I actually had a question on the last item. I was just wondering if anything ever came of the discussions between Fox Point and Mapledale about consolidation.
I don't want to talk about other school districts, but they are on hold on that discussion. Larry, I don't know specifically, but they had, Mapledale just hired a new superintendent, Mr. Tim Joint, in July. So that kind of has everything on hold. So I'm not sure where they are at currently.
Thank you.
Okay. And if there's no one else, going
I'll
once,
make a motion.
going twice. All right, I'll entertain a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Second?
Okay, all in favor, going left to right. Molly,
Aye.
Tamika,
Aye.
Danielle,
Aye.
Andy Franklin votes aye. Motion carries. Thank you all for joining us tonight. It was a wonderful meeting. Thank you for joining us officially, Elliot Moser, Dr. Elliot Moser. And I guess we will see you in another 2 weeks. The date of that third Wednesday. Larry, it's 21st, we said?
October 21st,
Okay, terrific.
6:30.
All right.
All right, thank you. Have a good night, everyone.
Bye.
Yep.
Stay safe, everyone.
Yep, bye-bye.